Welcome to Smart Manufacturing Mindset, where we challenge guests to think differently about manufacturing. We'll explore the nuances that hide in plain sight behind the acronyms, techno-jargon, and misinformation to get to the truths that hold real value for real people in the industry.
Welcome. My name is Mike Yost, co-founder of Bennett AI, and I will be your host today for our session. I'm excited that you could join us here for the first session of the CESMII Smart Manufacturing Mindset LinkedIn Live event, where at every session we are going to challenge ourselves and our guests to think differently about smart manufacturing. Today, I'm thrilled to chat with a group of industry leaders, our panelists, to talk about the role of leadership in smart manufacturing. So joining me in the studio today are John Dyck, the CEO of CESMII. Welcome, John. Audrey St.Onge, the president and GM of Lallemand Baking. Hello, Audrey. Habib Quazi, senior executive at ExxonMobil. Welcome, Habib. And Jim Wetzel, the co-founder at the NxGen Group. Welcome, Jim. Now, these are the folks that everybody wants to hear from, so I will get out of the way here in just a minute, but I just want to go through a few housekeeping items first. First of all, if you do not know CESMII, you should. CESMII is the U.S.'s National Institute on Smart Manufacturing. It's a nonprofit public-private partnership with the Department of Energy, and CESMII is a membership organization that's driving technology research, creating educational content, and they're using events like this to help build the smart manufacturing ecosystem. And this series that we're producing right now would not be possible without the support of SME, who is co-producing this set of events with CESMII. Our goal with this webinar series is to zero in on different ways of thinking about leadership, about technology, about manufacturing in the modern day, and thinking about what's possible. So we are live streaming on LinkedIn Live, and we welcome your comments and your questions. We'll take those questions if we can fit them into the flow of the conversation and if they're appropriate. So feel free to contribute. The event is being recorded, so you can watch it again as many times as you want later. And lastly, we would invite you to get to know CESMII. You can check them out online at cesmi.org, on LinkedIn. And on their website, there's a ton of information about everything that CESMII does, their mission, their projects, their research, education, membership, and much, much more. So with that, let's get on to the show. And I would like to start, John, with a question for you. You feel that this topic of a smart manufacturing mindset is important enough for you to commission this entire series of webinars. And you're investing your own personal time and your organization's resources. And I guess the question I want to start with is why? What do you think is so important about a mindset, smart manufacturing mindset? And what do you want people to know that is happening here that's different enough for them to pay attention to, not just in today's event, but with the monthly sessions that we're going to have here?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I too am excited to be part of this inaugural discussion with a collection of great industry leaders, luminaries, thought leaders. This has become an increasingly urgent initiative or issue for us for two reasons. Number one, I think if we look at the manufacturing productivity data here in the US, anybody can look at the Federal Reserve statistics, download the numbers, and see that manufacturing productivity in the US has declined dramatically for the first time in recorded history over the past decade. And ironically, that's fully coincident with the introduction of the fourth industrial revolution around that time frame when we began seeing that plateauing and decline of productivity, when we were promised a massive value creation through Industry 4.0, through this idea of the industrial Internet of Things and these great new technologies and capabilities. But here we are 12 years later. McKinsey tells us, as do many others in this space, that pilot purgatory is the status quo, that between 80 and 85% of all projects in this space stall or are not qualified as successful. And so we're left with an important question that says, what's going on and how can we accelerate the value creation and realization that we know is inherent in this idea of smart manufacturing. And so we began working in late 2022 with 25 great manufacturing executives that have come together to form the Smart Manufacturing Executive Council. And in our inaugural call, late January, we introduced this concept of a smart manufacturing mindset as a way for us to begin articulating the value and the urgent need to think differently, perhaps in a disruptive and transformative way about manufacturing. And I know we'll have this conversation, but from where I stand, the movements, the sort of significant cultural and transformative initiatives from previous decades in the 80s and 90s around quality, around continuous improvement, around safety, formed significant cultural movements that we believe represents how we need to be thinking about smart manufacturing going forward, that we can't continue this pilot or use case mentality where we invest in one thing at a time without a larger strategic framework, a larger set of opportunities and ways of thinking about smart manufacturing. So I'll leave it at that, but this is an urgent initiative for us. This is one of the most strategic things I think we can do is give voice to this notion that we need a more long-term and strategic framework and worldview, if you will, perspective on how to invest to make our manufacturing operations more productive and more competitive here in the U.S.
Appreciate that. And so why don't we jump in here and get the group talking, and Audrey, if we can start with you, let's start by defining what is a smart manufacturing mindset.
Thanks, Mike. And John, you said it well. As we've mentioned, I'll just break this up in a couple components because there's a few questions within it that I feel that we need to clarify as we look at the role of leadership in smart manufacturing. First of all, starting with what smart manufacturing means. I look at it as a collective architecture of how each facet of the business works together with manufacturing by leveraging digital solutions to allow better decisions and higher transparency within. So how collectively as a team we work, or as a business we work together.
That's excellent. So Habib or Jim, you want to comment in from your perspective?
Yeah, I can jump in. Hi, my name is Habib Quazi. I'm the Director of Innovation and Business Transformation at ExxonMobil for the downstream and chemicals portfolio. And I have very little background in digital, but I was told it's a leadership exercise, not a digital exercise. And that's a good way to start the conversation on the mindset. To me, the mindset is really all about what's your ambition, what's your goal? Do you want to maintain your current competitiveness? Do you want to close competitiveness gaps to 1Q within your industry? Do you want to leapfrog and become best in class across industries? And if so, are you aware enough about the possibilities of transformation enabled by digital? Do you have a big enough ambition, and do you have the organization for strategy to execution, as well as the governance to make sure you're making progress so you don't get trapped in the pilot purgatory? Or in our company, a great leader once said, we're stuck in random acts of digital, and you want to avoid that and really capture large value. And to me, that's the mindset. It starts with leadership, and technology follows, and it's actually easier than getting the mindset going.
Excellent. Jim, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. Just Jim Wetzel, co-founder of NxGen and previously director of engineering at General Mills. I just want to add on to what Habib said. The kind of the current state of the state, or historic state of the state, maybe, has been to start with technology. It hasn't been to address the mindset. It has not been to address the leadership. It has been kind of bottom up pushed, where technologists have figured out new toys, right? So we've got new capability. We've got cloud capability. We've got IoT capability. We've got a lot of things that we couldn't do easily before that today we can do more easily. We can do it more cost effectively. And there's this groundswell to push from the technology perspective. And we've just in the few minutes we've started this conversation, we've heard about pilot purgatory. We've heard about what does it take to actually sustain and make an impact of your organization. And that's why the concept of mindset is so important, because this is a cultural shift. This is putting a different set of glasses on of how you look at the problem. So in my old company at General Mills, it would be, are you fishing from the same pond that everybody else is fishing from? And you're just hoping to catch that fish that you've always known is in there, but you haven't been able to catch? Or are you seeing new opportunities and this is a new pond? And you're exposing opportunities and business models and capabilities that allow your organization to get somewhere else instead of the same old pond. And I would suggest when you really get into the mindset concept, you not only have the old pond where you have the traditional things that you can get at, you also have this new pond of opportunity that you didn't even think was possible. And to do that, you've really expanded beyond just internal focus, but you are now starting to look at external. You're starting to look at your partners, and you're trying to figure out the digital transformation of your ecosystem, not just one line and one plant and one pilot purgatory.
And if I could just add, I think change is at the core of the smart manufacturing journey. And knowing that we don't have all the answers up front, I think we as leaders, we need to embrace it, have this fearless approach about it. I think it's here to stay. And again, knowing the benefits of what it brings to the business and culture all around.
Yeah, I know several years ago, and I don't know if it goes as far back as the stats you were quoting, John, or not, but the Industrial Internet Consortium quoted the phrase internet thinking, right? And I thought that did a good job of sort of starting to challenge, well, what does that mean? What's possible if we can do things with technology? And I think to your point, Jim, we've talked before about smart manufacturing being an and story, right? You need to solve this problem and that problem and that problem, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe Jim, sticking with you for a second, John brought up about, pillars of quality and safety and things like that. And I know you have thoughts on sort of mirroring them from a smart manufacturing perspective as, corporate strategic pillars. You want to talk on about that, how you define a mindset in a parallel to those types of initiatives?
Yeah, here's what I think is so interesting and provocative about the concept of smart manufacturing as a mindset, especially compared to how we traditionally over the last 20 or 30 years have thought about these fundamental shifts and changes that we've had. To some extent, and I don't want to over dramatize this, but to some extent, we've created these pillars in our organization, like the quality movement, the safety movement, continuous improvement. The pillar, by just the word using pillar, makes it sound like it's a silo, right? We draw pictures of Parthenons. We have pillars, and we say, continuous improvement pillar. This is our maintenance, autonomous maintenance thing. Here's our TPM thing. Here's our so on and so on. But when we really talk about the mindset of smart manufacturing, it's all encompassing. It goes sideways, right? It's across all of these things, because we're talking really about enabling agility, enabling responsiveness, and enabling contextualization of data from its different sources, so it can be used to ask and answer different questions that are broader than an individual pillar. So when you think about the lift that comes before us, is you can't really do smart manufacturing without some base continuous improvement, quality efforts, safety efforts. But as you begin that journey, as you think about how can I knit this sideways so that I have a digital thread throughout this whole process, so that I can answer questions in the future that I'm not even thinking about now. Because if we built a smart manufacturing pillar that was in fact a silo of data, we'd be better off. Clearly, we'd be better off, but we'd not be where we need to be, and that is knitting all of this stuff together.
Well, and I don't want to go down the technology route, but I think that what you're talking about with the contextualization of data and having access to horizontal access really ties in, John, with the mission of CESMII, right? And what you're doing, like we're here talking about mindset, but what your institute is doing is driving research, right, around interoperability and data collection and contextualization and things like that. So it seems to me that this is an extension off of really what's core to CESMII.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound trite, but there are technology providers, consultants, implementers that are all out there selling great new toys and technologies and capabilities. I don't mean to trivialize them; they're vital. But at the end of the day, you've got organizations that are either selling people hours and services like consultants and systems integrators, or you've got organizations like software vendors that are selling software, or you've got organizations that are out there thinking and writing papers and kind of the think tank association approach. But each one of them will sell you based on what they have to sell. And we, as a home of smart manufacturing here in the U.S., have been very intentional to be holistic in our approach, to think deep thoughts as an ecosystem. We've got 180 plus fantastic organizations here contributing and helping us ensure that we're doing the right things. We have the right thoughts, the right roadmap, the right investment plan, but that it's about the people and the process and the technology, and that we can provide vendor agnostic guidance. And I want to hear from both Habib and Audrey, because in our previous conversations, you've both touched on the idea that there's a historic mindset or a historic sort of culture in our organizations that you've both spoken to quite eloquently about how risk and reward sort of take us away from innovation by default. And I don't mean to put you on the spot because this isn't part of the official preparation, but Habib, can you comment on that? I do know that there's a very natural inclination to support the status quo because it's the easy thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. Such an important question, John, because to me, you have good people trying to do their best, but they're a product of their journey. And if for 30 years, 40 years, they've done things a certain way, and out comes some technology and some people who say, I can help you work better, the natural inclination is, first of all, to say, hey, wait a minute, who are you to tell me you can do my job better than I can? Or, yeah, I can see it. Let's add some bits and pieces and let's do a bunch of pilots so you can prove to me it works. And to me, it's so important to step back and say, understand and comprehend that, smart manufacturing and digital is not necessarily just a pillar. It can be a pillar, but it is a complete new way to revisit how you work. So I always talk about innovation and transformation enabled by digital. I never talk about digital transformation. And it's really, what's your goal? Is it financial? Is it competitiveness, gap closure? Is it being industry leading and working backwards? And to me, there's this whole history of people who've been very successful, reached the great heights of their industry, doing what they did for 30 years, and they don't have the awareness and the knowledge to fully comprehend the possibilities of what can be done now versus before. So I think raising the awareness of what's possible through various means, and we can talk about that, so you can raise the ambition to a level beyond pilot purgatory or random acts of digital, or liberate some data so I can make some better decisions, becomes really important. And then having the right accountability model, so you hold people accountable to push hard rather than just take incremental steps, I think is the third bit that's really important for us to achieve full potential leveraging digital and to remain competitive, to be frank with you.
Mm-hmm. And just to extend on that, just to go a step even beyond the awareness zone, as a leader, you have to be self-aware. you need to also accept that you're going to grow, and you have to challenge your biases, as we're describing here, and get out of those comfort zones, because things will change. And it's the core of smart manufacturing, change, and how we move through this by creating psychological safety in your cultures, I think is a big to-do for all of us, as there's a lot of unknowns that are going to come with this, and being open to challenge each other in a very candid way, so we can learn through the experience of things. But as a leader, I think in this world that we're describing here, call it pillars or no pillars, the hierarchy of things that maybe one is used to in the past, we have to step out of this in terms of removing barriers and allowing quicker responses and transparency amongst all of us, because that's what the data is doing as we expand this new horizon. It's giving us access to this information that none of us may have had before at our fingertips. So, but at the heart of it is the people, and you can't let go of that. As they grow, you grow, and the organization grows.
Audrey, that's a great reminder. In our Smart Manufacturing Executive Council discussion, we initiated this idea of a smart manufacturing playbook and defined the core 8 stakeholders that are all essential to this idea of a smart manufacturing mindset. And I think this speaks to what all of you have pointed out as being sort of historically a more of a point solution or pillar approach that a specific individual stakeholder has perhaps initiated and brought to the organization. The idea that a mindset encompasses not just your organization stakeholder, but your partner ecosystem is, I think, vital. And so if I can just kind of share by memory here, if I can do this, the 8 stakeholder sets that were identified by our executive council were the corporate manufacturing and supply chain leadership, the plant leadership team, number 3, the strategy consultants, number 4, your technology providers, number 5, your systems integrators, your machine builders, number 6, number 7, your learning and training ecosystem, and last but not least, your operators. And I think in so many ways, in so many cases, at least in my experience, that frontline worker has been sort of an afterthought, somebody you maybe rope in as part of a training exercise to make sure that there's solution buy-in best case. And yet I think that operator anymore is perhaps one of the most important catalysts or stakeholder sets to address some of the fundamental changing dynamics in this marketplace in terms of finding and retaining great operators in our manufacturing operations. Anybody want to comment on that? To me, first of all, this notion of stakeholders, and secondly, this notion of that operator, that frontline worker, that's so key to the success and the ability for us to be competitive here in this country.
Yeah, I'll jump in, John, and help you out on that as well. So as you're talking about that, and as remember the concept of the playbook and the different communities, as a leader, one of the topics that needs to be addressed in this new mindset is the leadership needs to take a position around data flow. So if you abdicate the data flow to your IT department, nothing's going to come out. It's going to be constrained in your little box and in your little silo. And if you think about what operators need, let's go all the way down to that operator community, and you go, okay, what's leadership going to do to make sure that operators are empowered? Mm-hmm. Are we going to let the functional silos, which get in their way and are barriers to allow operators to be empowered? Or does a leader need to stand through and cut through the muck and say, hey, gang, I am sponsoring the fact that we are going to have transparent flow of information so that an operator can make the right action at the right time. And if they need to take advantage of some financial information or some customer information or some specification information, whatever might be appropriate for that particular role, we're going to have the freedom to do that. We're going to use smart manufacturing to execute it. But this mindset around data and the transparency of data, not only inside your company, but then externally as well, because all of us have heard the horror stories of, well, no one will share information. Well, guess who can unlock that? Leadership can unlock that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so now it's really about defining the governance and the provenance of data and the cybersecurity and all the technical details of that. But someone needs to stand tall and say, our mission is to share, be transparent, be reactive, be agile. And we're going to do that through the flow of information.
So our goal was to have a 30-minute conversation. We're almost through that already. So I'm going to bump the edge out a little bit and keep us going here for just a few extra minutes, if that's okay. But stick to that point where you were going, Jim, about leadership's role. And are there specific examples that you can cite? Because there were several things that were mentioned throughout the course here of different descriptors of what would be the right kind of mindset. It doesn't sound like there's a one specific path. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways that people could approach this depending on their business. But do you have examples, things that
a really simple example, Mike, I think the other panelists will probably jump on as well. The simplest example is think about supply chain. And you think about your ecosystem and your partners that want to exchange information to be able to be more efficient, to be more reactive in ability to serve their customers, all the different customers, tier 1, tier 2, up, down the supply chain. Yet, do you think any president of that organization would say, and the way we're going to do that is not tell anybody anything. We're going to be an isolated part of a supply network and not tell anybody anything. Right. So it's kind of Captain Obvious to figure out that, hey, if you shared information appropriately, you could figure out how to become more efficient. Well, what could you become more efficient on? Well, that's this mindset concept, right? It's that, well, let's think about what might become possible now that I've broken through this concept. I can't talk to you. I can't share with you because it's competitive pressure this or it's IP that. And when you start looking at the sharing nature, you soon find out that there's business models and there's breakthrough performance that can be happened that's differential from what we're existing today.
And just to also share in terms of the getting the culture more comfortable with the analytics and dashboard, I think is what also Jim is phrasing here, giving them the access. It's our role as leaders to understand what those skill gaps are and to bring the training to them so that there's more of this cohesive collaborative space to help make decisions that are moving quicker in the business world that we deal with today.
Yeah, I'm looking at the comments coming in from LinkedIn Live, and I see digital skills and digital mindset alignment, which goes with exactly what you're talking about, Audrey. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I saw a great question from Jeff Kent, Vice President, Smart Platforms at Procter & Gamble. He's also on the Executive Council, and he's raised a fantastic question about the idea that smart manufacturing begins and ends with the operators of our equipment and processes. And he goes on to say, can you speak to the education skills and inspiration to recruit, train, and retain the smart manufacturing operators of today and tomorrow in the U.S.? That's a vital question, and it brings back to the conversation, back to our thinking in this whole space that there are some fundamental new transformative business drivers behind investing in smart manufacturing, and that is making the worker the center of the universe. And so the idea that we as in this collection between CESMII, the SME, and the Smart Manufacturing Executive Council can work together to bring this mindset to life, to provide the incentives, to provide the guidance. We're working aggressively on this idea of a playbook, which is still several months out, but this notion that we can bring this vendor agnostic, thoughtful, stakeholder-centric set of guidance to the marketplace to bring these important ideas to the marketplace, I think is absolutely key. we have to be more thoughtful about the nuances. There is so much misinformation in this space. We're 4 decades into using manufacturing information to drive decision support, to improve operations, but frankly, we're still way too green in our ability to do this on the operations side. And so there's an important role that we play together with SME in bringing those misconceptions to the light, to shine the light on some of these important leadership issues, opportunities, on some of these important technology opportunities and challenges, and make sure that we're collectively driving towards the right things, and that we're not here 5 years from now with a jaded sense of where we've been, this notion that we've got 85% of our projects still in pilot purgatory. That is not going to bode well for our need as a nation to become more competitive, and the notion that if we're going to regionalize our supply chains and see some reshoring happen in this country, it can't happen with a declining productivity rate here in the U.S. And so, obviously we're all passionate about this, but we feel the sense of burden, I guess, and the sense of urgency around getting this word out to the marketplace, and it's through great voices like the ones here and the ones that we will be able to bring to you in the monthly Smart Manufacturing Mindset webcast that we've initiated here today.
Yeah, and you know, I think we could probably go for another couple of hours and still barely scratch the surface of what we're talking about here. So I guess from an actionable, maybe I'll give everybody a chance here just to sort of give a next step or an advice to someone, but maybe just start with you, John, on is the Executive Council, the work that you're doing there, is that an area where people can either follow, plug into, see what's happening that will be attacking or addressing these types of issues going forward? People can keep a finger on the pulse of.
Yeah, so the Executive Council specifically is a small, hand-selected set of manufacturing executives that have OT and IT experience, that have business and technology experience, and that have a passion for giving back and helping the community. These are some of the greatest manufacturers in the world that are on this Executive Council. And if you fit that profile as a manufacturing executive, we would welcome your support and engaging here. But there's this broader ecosystem that we are all working to engage with and to address and to accelerate across this digital divide. Join us here at CESMII to figure out how we can support one another in this education process, in this disruptive technology process, in this effort towards interoperability and openness and collaboration versus proprietary and data siloed and stovepipe architecture sort of approaches. And so that becomes, together with our great partners at SME, that becomes our broader mandate to reduce the cost and complexity of smart manufacturing so that all manufacturers, no matter what size they are, can benefit from and implement these important capabilities.
Excellent. So plugging in, staying connected with CESMII, having your voice heard is a good step forward. Maybe from the others here, just a quick, if you can have a takeaway here for somebody to say, I can go and do any recommendations as far as what you would tell somebody in a manufacturing leadership position to go and do.
I can start.
Please. Go ahead, Audrey.
Go ahead.
Well, some of the advice that I would give to someone wanting to change their organization through this journey is to start by sitting down and trying to create a vision, and also that having a can-do attitude as a senior leader can take you a long way, and understanding that you're not going to be able to do this on your own. Key partnerships, as we're describing here today, university associations as well can help in understanding gaps in your businesses. And one thing that I've learned through this as well is it's going to require patience, and things that I just don't think about is failure, complexity, and the impossibleness of doing things.
Love that. Habib, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say the smart manufacturing mindset starts with awareness of what's possible. If you don't know what's possible, you can't possibly have an ambition to do bigger things than you're pursuing today. So educating oneself and the leadership team, there's a whole body of work available everywhere. The smart manufacturing playbook could be another very important learning opportunity, but raise awareness of your team on what's possible and use that plus the objectives of your company to define your ambition. And we can do silly things like, I'm going to close my competitiveness gap within my industry to first Q over a 3-year period. Guess what? They're not standing still. By the time you reach where they are today, they might be 5 years ahead of you again. So understand enough on where things are headed, how you need to fundamentally rethink the way you work, and then set your ambition appropriately and get a program of work underway. And as Audrey said, just be bold, get underway. You don't need to have every question answered, every problem solved on day one. It's like a 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step. And if you can see the first 3 steps, it's okay to get started, because the rest of the steps will reveal themselves. And governance is really important. What gets measured and what gets attention, gets done. So how are you making progress? Are you counting activities, tasks, pilots, or are you counting competitiveness gap closure, how much money we're making, how much data we're liberating that's speeding up our decision making, and so on? Very important. So awareness, driving ambition, then the ambition being framed with the right level of accountability to make tangible progress, to me, is the advice I would give you as you get started on your digital transformation journey. And it really has to start with rethinking the way you work versus just doing some digital work.
Yeah, appreciate that, Habib. Jim, you want to give us your final thoughts here?
Well, it's tough to top that. So, Habib, I really appreciate what you said, and Audrey as well. And I just maybe a couple points. So first of all, agree with everything that's been said. The only couple things that I would add on top of all that for the leadership side was you have to be an authentic leader. So it's one thing to read a playbook and then try to memorize the playbook and then execute the playbook. It's another thing to have it in your DNA. And that's what we're really talking about with a mindset shift, is this is in you. It's not fake. It's not something trumped up. You didn't all of a sudden read the book on safety and believe everyone should go home safe. You didn't just read the book on quality and say, my product should be of high quality. It's in you. It's what your values of your organization are. It's authentic. And so I think there's an opportunity to educate, like Habib talked about, awareness and stuff, but so you can be your authentic self as you lead. Mm-hmm. The second part about that is that the buck stops with you as a leader, and you have to walk the talk. Mm-hmm. So yes, your engineers might be putting in control systems, and your IT people might be putting in dashboards, but at some point you need to weigh into that and say, that's not good enough. That's not the model we want to go after. Because if you don't say that, who's going to listen to the operating community? Who's going to listen to that operator that says, yeah, we just spent $1 million and we got new dashboards and I have no idea how to use them? The leader's got to have their back. So when the leader is authentic, when the leader gets it, and the leader can weigh into these projects and these portfolios of things that are going on, whether it be, people, process, or technology, now you've got some juice going. They're walking the talk. They're modeling the behavior they want to see. They're not having to fake it during work, because faking it all day long is really tough. It has to be authentic. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is where leadership and all of this stuff will come together. And we might label it mindset, but we know that it's all about leadership, and it's all about driving this authentically.
Well, excellent. Appreciate that. Appreciate all of that. Appreciate all of the comments as well. There are more comments than I can even count coming in. So we will take a look at those and see if we can respond back to those questions or find some way to acknowledge them. We appreciate everybody being a part of this. We appreciate Audrey and Habib and Jim and John for their time and their experience and their willingness to share. We'd also like to thank SME for the role that they play in catalyzing this webcast series and working with CESMII to build out this ecosystem that hopefully is instilling the right mindset, right? So I would encourage everybody to follow CESMII on LinkedIn, check them out at cesmi.org. And then join us again next month for the next edition of this webcast series, this LinkedIn Live series, the Smart Manufacturing Mindset. We will be hosting these events the last Tuesday of each month. So on May 30th, the CESMII Vice President of Technology, Jonathan Wise, will engage with me and a few other panelists and challenge everybody to think differently about the convergence of OT and IT. So until then, we remind you that when you think about smart manufacturing, think differently. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.